It is a humiliating sight for one of the country's biggest food brands.
KFC just got hit with one of its worst sales drops since the pandemic began. Their excuse? Inflation. But the truth runs deeper than rising costs or shrinking wallets. KFC has tried to wipe videos like this before, not once, not twice, but over and over again. Because the last thing they want is for you to see what really goes on behind the scenes. What's lurking behind those shiny red buckets, that secret recipe, and that smiling face of Colonel Sanders. If they had the power, they'd take this one down too, just like the others. But the truth? It always leaks out eventually, especially when it's covered in fryer grease. KFC chicken doesn't just taste good by accident. That mouth-watering flavor is built in a lab, not a kitchen. The so-called 11 herbs and spices, that's just marketing. What's really working overtime on your brain is MSG, monosodium glutamate. It's not illegal. It's not even hidden. You can find it listed right on KFC's ingredient disclosures. But what they don't tell you in the ads is that MSG is a potent flavor enhancer designed to overstimulate the savory receptors in your mouth. It creates that addictive umami effect, and it makes your brain light up like it just won something. But it doesn't stop there. Some KFC menu items, especially the original recipe and extra crispy chicken, are also soaked in sodium phosphate brines before frying. Why? Because it breaks down muscle tissue, holds in moisture, and makes cheap chicken taste juicy, even if it's been frozen for weeks. You're not just eating chicken. You're eating engineered texture, lab-calibrated savoriness, and salt on steroids. One extra crispy chicken breast, Nashville hot style, contains over 40 grams of fat and 1,390 milligrams of sodium. That's more than half your recommended daily sodium limit in a single piece. Add a biscuit and mashed potatoes? You're basically signing up for a day's worth of salt, sugar, and grease in one sitting. And that's the real secret behind why KFC tastes so good. It's not tradition, it's chemistry. KFC's famous gravy isn't just brown sauce, it's a warning label disguised as comfort food. Customers assume it's made from rich chicken stock or roasted pan drippings, something warm, something real. But former employees and leaked training videos tell a very different story. KFC gravy starts with what they call crackling, the leftover gunk scraped from the bottom of the deep fryer. We're talking about clumps of burnt batter, overcooked skin flakes, and tiny fragments of whatever was fried last. It all gets scooped up, collected in trays, and stored until it's time to turn it into gravy. The process is simple. Add hot water, stir in a powdered gravy mix, whisk in the fryer scrapings, and let it simmer until it looks like something edible. In reality, it's a slurry of reused grease and flavor chemicals masquerading as food. KFC doesn't hide this either. In a viral TikTok video filmed inside a UK kitchen, an employee openly shows the entire gravy-making process. The video racked up millions of views, and while some viewers defended it as just recycling, most were horrified. Comments called it gross, unforgivable, and the last time I ever order that. KFC tried to laugh it off. But here's the kicker. That brown gravy that comes with your meal, it may have been built on yesterday's fryer waste, soaked in oil, reheated and handed to you with a smile. Gravy never sounded so unappetizing. The chicken in your bucket didn't live a peaceful life. In fact, most KFC chickens barely lived at all. They're bred for one thing: rapid growth. On KFC supplier farms, broiler chickens are pushed to reach slaughter weight in just 30 to 35 days. That's about twice as fast as chickens grew 50 years ago. But their bones, muscles, and organs, they haven't caught up. Many can't even support their own weight. Some collapse under pressure. Others lie in their own waste for days because their legs give out before their bodies do. According to animal welfare investigations in the UK and US, this accelerated growth leads to painful deformities, ammonia burns, and immobility. KFC knows this. In 2019, they announced something called the Better Chicken Commitment in Europe. It sounded promising. But in the US, they still refuse to sign on. And when conditions get too filthy, there's a backup plan: antibiotics. For years, KFC suppliers routinely gave chickens human-grade antibiotics, not to cure illness, but to prevent it in dirty environments. They even injected antibiotics into eggs before the chicks hatched. KFC pledged in 2017 to stop this in the US, and by 2019 they claimed they had. But for decades, their business model depended on sick birds surviving just long enough to be sold. It's not farm to table, it's factory to freezer. And the more you learn, the less original recipe sounds like a compliment. Not all chicken at KFC is carved from a bird. Some of it is engineered, shaped, bonded, and deep-fried until you forget where it came from. Take popcorn chicken, for example, or chicken nuggets served in certain international markets. These aren't just small cuts of meat. They're often made from restructured chicken mash. That means leftover scraps, muscle trimmings, skin, tendons, all blended into a pink paste, treated with sodium phosphates, stabilizers, and emulsifiers, then pressed into bite-sized shapes. To make it look and taste real, artificial flavorings, synthetic grill marks, and a golden brown exterior designed to hide how heavily processed it all is. In 2015, health officials in India found traces of E. coli and salmonella in KFC chicken samples taken from a Hyderabad outlet. These are dangerous bacteria linked to food poisoning and serious illness. While KFC denied the findings, the report by local food safety authorities raised urgent concerns about hygiene and quality control at international locations. For a brand promising global standards, that's not just alarming, it's potentially life-threatening. And the scary part? Many customers assume these are lighter options, especially parents buying popcorn chicken for kids. But these aren't wholesome snacks. They're meat puzzles glued together in food labs, built for crunch and chewiness, not nutrition. If you think you're eating a crispy chicken strip from Grandma's kitchen, look again. You're biting into the future of fast food. Mass-produced, molded, and microwaved for scale. Feeding antibiotics to chickens doesn't just affect the chickens, it affects us. For decades, KFC suppliers used antibiotics not to treat illness, but to prevent it. In other words, they preloaded their birds with drugs just to keep them alive long enough to be slaughtered. And when you do that on a massive scale, you create a perfect breeding ground for antibiotic-resistant bacteria. These are called superbugs. Germs that shrug off the medicines we once relied on to survive infections. And they don't stay on the farm. They travel through workers, through water runoff, through the meat itself. Public health organizations, including the World Health Organization and CDC, have warned that overusing antibiotics in agriculture is one of the driving forces behind rising antibiotic resistance. In 2016, pressure mounted. KFC was singled out by health advocates as one of the last major chains still allowing medically important antibiotics in its chicken. After months of backlash, KFC pledged to ban them, at least in the US. It was a victory, sort of. The damage had already been done. For years, they pumped animals full of drugs just to keep up with production. And what's the cost of that shortcut? According to the CDC, at least 35,000 Americans each year from antibiotic-resistant infections. So if the chicken doesn't make you sick, the bacteria it helped create just might. That's not just a food issue, that's a public health crisis. You might think the safest part of your KFC meal is the drink, but the ice in your cup? It could be hiding something worse than grease. In 2017, an undercover investigation in the UK found fecal bacteria in the ice at several KFC locations. Let that sink in. Traces of human waste in the ice cubes. Health experts called the findings extremely concerning, and they were right. Ice machines are often the most neglected equipment in any fast food restaurant. They're dark, moist, and rarely cleaned properly, the perfect breeding ground for bacteria, mold, and slime. Some studies have even found more bacteria in fast food ice than in toilet water. KFC responded by saying they were taking immediate action and launched emergency inspections of every store in the country. But here's the thing, that story only went viral because it made the news. How many times does it happen when no one's watching? Former employees from US locations have reported black sludge building up inside ice machines, scoop handles left on dirty countertops, ice bins cleaned once a month, if that. And it's not just the machines. Some drink stations use reusable nozzles that aren't properly sanitized. That syrupy sweet Pepsi you're sipping, it might be passing through mildew-covered spouts and cracked tubing lined with grime. Cold doesn't equal clean. And refreshing hits different when you realize your soda might be spiked with bacteria. The next big news started with a video, a shaky phone camera inside a KFC kitchen in South Africa. What it captured didn't just go viral as it made people sick to their stomachs. In the footage, breaded chicken pieces, already coated in KFC's signature seasoning, are being rinsed off on the ground. Not on a prep table, not in a sink, on the concrete floor. An employee uses a garden hose to wash the meat as it slides around in a pool of water, flour, and oil. It looks less like food prep and more like car wash meets biohazard. KFC responded fast. They claimed the chicken was expired, not meant for customers, and was being discarded, just not correctly. They fired the staff and insisted this was a one-time violation of protocol. But here's the problem. That chicken had already been seasoned, which means it had been through several steps in the food prep process before someone decided to drag it across the floor. If this is what happens when a camera's rolling, what happens when no one's watching? The video fed into a bigger fear that behind the stainless steel counters and happy ads, there's a very different story playing out. One where rules are bent, food is reused, and expired product gets a quick rinse and a second chance. Not exactly finger-licking good. In 2014, KFC's biggest nightmare wasn't in the US, it was in China. A hidden camera investigation exposed one of KFC's main poultry suppliers doing the unthinkable, repackaging expired meat and stamping it with fresh labels. Workers at the plant were shown mixing rotten chicken with new batches, cutting off the visibly moldy parts, and marinating it in sauce to cover the smell. Some of the meat was reportedly green before being sent to stores. And yes, it still went out for delivery. The supplier, Shanghai Husi Food, also provided meat to other chains like McDonald's. But KFC took the hardest hit. Their China sales plummeted by double digits overnight. Customers were furious. Yum. Brands. KFC's parent company cut ties with the plant immediately. But that didn't undo the damage. It raised one chilling question. How many customers had already eaten the spoiled chicken before anyone found out? Even worse, this wasn't the first time KFC faced scrutiny in China. Just 2 years earlier, their suppliers were accused of overusing antibiotics in poultry, creating additional public backlash. These weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a larger pattern. Suppliers pushing past the limits to keep up with demand, while KFC corporate looked the other way, until it hit the headlines. It's easy to promise change once you're caught. It's harder to explain how it was allowed in the first place. In 2019, KFC faced a public health disaster in Mongolia, and this time, it couldn't be ignored. More than 240 customers in the capital city of Ulaanbaatar fell violently ill after eating at one of the country's 11 KFC branches. Within days, 42 people were hospitalized, suffering from symptoms like vomiting, fever, and diarrhea. The cause? A confirmed outbreak of Shigella and E. coli, both bacteria commonly linked to poor hygiene and contaminated food handling. Health officials launched an immediate investigation. What they found wasn't just bacteria, it was a chain of neglect, improper food storage, tainted water used in drinks, and kitchen practices that failed even the most basic safety standards. KFC's Mongolian supplier had violated critical health codes, and the results were catastrophic. The government responded by temporarily shutting down every KFC outlet in the city. It wasn't a precaution, it was damage control. KFC's global PR team was quick to call it an isolated case and a local supplier issue, but the damage had already been done. Parents were furious. News coverage went international. And in a country where KFC had once symbolized modernity and Western indulgence, the name suddenly meant hospitalization and fear. There were no deaths. But for dozens of families, it was a wake-up call that beneath the branding, fast food safety isn't a guarantee, it's a gamble. And KFC didn't exactly take a victory lap. There were no sweeping reforms, no public apology tour, just quiet closures, a few inspections, and a return to business as usual. Because for most people, food poisoning is a bad night. But for a franchise built on cutting corners, it's just another cost of doing business. Back to the US. The US KFC outlets are strategically concentrated in low-income, high-density neighborhoods. Look at food maps from cities like Detroit, Memphis, or Atlanta. You'll find clusters of fried chicken joints, fast food chains, and dollar menus all in one place. Grocery stores, fresh produce, often miles away. This isn't accidental, it's strategic. A study in the American Journal of Public Health found that fast food companies target low-income Black and Latino neighborhoods with 5 times more ads for unhealthy food and 50% more ads for sugary drinks than wealthier white areas. For chains like KFC, it's not about feeding communities. It's about flooding them with junk, then calling it convenience. KFC is no exception. Their ads push value buckets, $5 fill-ups, and family meals like they're doing people a favor. But behind the generosity is a brutal reality. These meals are high in sodium, saturated fat, and engineered to be addictive. Salt, sugar, and fat hit the brain like drugs. Literally. They activate dopamine responses that train you to crave more, even when you're full. And when healthier options are out of reach, KFC doesn't just win by default. It thrives. It's not just about feeding communities. It's about hooking them. Because once your taste buds are trained, once your kids beg for the bucket, you're not choosing KFC anymore. You're relying on it, and that's the way they like it. KFC doesn't just feed families, it recruits the next generation. Behind every cartoon-themed bucket or kids' meal combo is a calculated marketing strategy built on brand imprinting, the psychological wiring that happens when children associate flavor with comfort, happiness, and safety. Studies in consumer neuroscience show that children exposed to fast food flavors early are more likely to form lifetime eating habits based on those stimuli. And KFC is fully aware. That's why in countries like Japan, Indonesia, and Mexico, you'll find KFC mascots, apps with avatars, collectible toys, and even school sponsorships pushing the brand into classrooms. In the US, their Lil Bucket Kids meal offers fun-sized versions of adult meals in colorful packaging with cartoon characters. But here's the hook. It's still fried chicken, mashed potatoes, and a biscuit slathered in over 400 milligrams of sodium per meal. That's not child nutrition. That's early taste training. They're not feeding children, they're programming them. Because once your 5-year-old associates KFC with reward, joy, or family bonding, that connection becomes emotional infrastructure. By the time they're adults, the craving isn't just for chicken, it's for the feeling that came with it. And that's how you build customers for life, not with quality. With childhood nostalgia dressed in a red bucket. Behind every KFC storefront is a franchisee, someone who bought into the dream of owning a business. But for many, it's a nightmare in disguise. KFC's parent company, Yum Brands, doesn't just sell you a franchise, they sell you control over pricing, suppliers, uniforms, menu items, even what kind of napkins you can stock. And here's the catch. Franchisees don't get to shop around. They're forced to buy from corporate-approved suppliers, even if those suppliers charge 30 to 40% more than local vendors. You can't just lower your prices to compete. KFC sets mandatory pricing rules, sometimes even demanding expensive promotions, and the cost comes out of your pocket. One former franchise owner told us that KFC nickel and dimed them into the red, taking cuts from every delivery, charging so-called technology fees for outdated POS systems, and offering little to no flexibility during economic downturns. Others describe being locked into 10 to 20-year contracts, unable to exit without massive penalties. One wrong move, and you're hit with legal threats or corporate buyouts, often for less than what you put in. The message is clear. You don't run a KFC. KFC runs you. It's painted as an opportunity in Dao, a slice of the American dream. But behind the red and white bucket is a system that bleeds small business owners dry, all while corporate profits stay deep-fried and golden. It's not just your arteries taking a hit, it's the planet. In 2012, Greenpeace exposed a disturbing link between KFC's packaging and the destruction of Indonesia's rainforests. Testing revealed that KFC's iconic food buckets and boxes were being produced using wood pulp sourced from illegal deforestation, forests that were home to critically endangered species like the Sumatran tiger and orangutan. The paper was traced back to Asia Pulp and Paper, a supplier notorious for clear-cutting some of the most biodiverse ecosystems on Earth. Even as global companies severed ties, Yum Brands, KFC's parent company, dragged its feet. They denied, they delayed, they refused to commit to sourcing sustainable packaging. And the fallout? Thousands of hectares of old-growth rainforest gone. For greasy cardboard soaked in oil and tossed in landfills. But it's not just trees. A 2020 report from Chain Reaction Research found that fast food giants like KFC are still indirectly connected to deforestation via soy and palm oil supply chains used in chicken feed and cooking oils. Translation? Your 8-piece meal might be cooked in oil linked to habitat collapse thousands of miles away. So the next time you toss a red and white bucket in the trash, remember, it's not just chicken. It's forest. It's species. It's silence bought with seasoning. Because behind the crunch is a chainsaw. Because in the end, the only one guaranteed to get fed is Yum Brands. Let's be real, after eating KFC, most people don't feel like champions. They feel bloated, guilty, sometimes sick. But here's the genius of fast food marketing. They don't need you to feel good. They just need you to come back. Behavioral economists call it strategic regret consumption, when companies design products that induce short-term satisfaction followed by long-term regret. It's the junk food cycle: binge, crash, repeat. KFC's most addictive offerings are front-loaded with dopamine triggers, fat, salt, sugar, the same reward chemicals activated by gambling or nicotine. Your brain lights up with excitement until the crash. And when do they advertise the most? During emotional lows, breakups, payday weekends, late-night loneliness. You feel like crap? KFC's there for you. You're stressed at work? Grab a $5 fill-up. You're hungover? Nothing a Zinger box can't fix. They aren't selling you food. They're selling you a temporary dopamine hit. And like any high, it wears off, leaving just enough shame to make you say, never again. But a few weeks later, you're back in the drive-thru, because that's the playbook. Overstimulate, crash, repeat. And the worse you feel, the easier you are to hook. KFC sells comfort, family, familiarity, a red and white bucket passed around the table. a smiling colonel beaming with Southern charm. But behind the branding lies a system that feeds on addiction, exploitation, and silence. They won't tell you their most famous flavor comes from MSG and chemical brines, not grandma's spice rack. They won't highlight that their gravy might be made from fried scrapings scraped off old oil. They won't show you the genetically engineered chickens who grow too fast to walk, or the superbugs their suppliers helped breed with decades of antibiotic abuse. They won't show you the ice machines crawling with bacteria, the raw chicken hosed down on the floor, or the expired meat relabeled and sold across borders. They'll never show you the dozens left poisoned after eating in one KFC, or the maps showing how they flood struggling neighborhoods with cheap, addictive calories while marketing it as generosity. And if you dared to open your own KFC, they'd lock you into a franchise agreement built to drain every dollar you earn while they collect their cut from the top. Because it's not just food, it's a business model, one that sells nostalgia on the outside and cuts corners on the inside. So the next time you see that smiling face or hear that jingle, ask yourself what it's really covering up. Because once you look past the bucket, you can't unsee what's underneath. And if you think this was bad, wait until you see what's coming next. Hit play on the next video.